The massive viewing screen in the Galactic Council chambers flickered to life, displaying the transmission that had arrived from a small blue planet in the Outer Rim territories. Council leader Zethkar adjusted his ceremonial robes and leaned forward in his floating throne, his four eyes focusing on the primitive signal that had traveled across the void. The transmission showed a bipedal creature with pale skin and short dark hair, dressed in what appeared to be formal attire. The being spoke in measured tones, its voice carrying through the universal translator with surprising clarity. Greetings to the Galactic Council. I am President John Carter of the planet Earth. We have recently developed faster-than-light communication and wish to formally request entry into your galactic community. We come in peace and hope to establish diplomatic relations with your member species. Zethkar's tentacles swayed gently as he considered the message. Another primitive species seeking to join the civilized galaxy, no doubt hoping to gain access to advanced technology and trade opportunities. The pattern was always the same. A newly spacefaring race would detect the Council's beacon signals and send formal requests for contact. Most were peaceful herbivores or gentle omnivores who had outgrown their warlike tendencies centuries ago. Junior Diplomat Crystal, Zethkar called to a small crystalline being hovering near the communication console. Please prepare the standard first contact protocols. Schedule a meeting at Harmony Point Station in 30 rotations. This appears to be a routine integration. Crystal's form shimmered with acknowledgement. Shall the first prepare the usual cultural exchange materials, Council Leader? The art galleries, meditation chambers, and philosophical discussion areas? Of course, Zethkar replied, already turning his attention to other matters. These humans appear civilized enough. Their communication was polite and properly formatted. I expect this will be another straightforward addition to our peaceful community. 3 weeks later, the sensors at Harmony Point Station detected an approaching vessel. Traffic Controller Yondar, a graceful being resembling a floating jellyfish, monitored the incoming ship with growing confusion. The vessel's design was unlike anything in the galactic database, angular, heavily armored and bristling with what appeared to be weapon systems. This cannot be the diplomatic vessel, Yondar muttered, checking the identification codes again. The signals matched, but the ship looked more like a military dreadnought than a peaceful exploration craft. Perhaps they are still a young species and have not yet learned proper diplomatic vessel design. The ship designated itself as the USS Defiance, and its captain requested docking permissions in what the translator recognized as formal military terminology. Yondar approved the docking request and alerted Junior Diplomat Crystal that the human delegation had arrived. In the station's main docking bay, a small crowd of curious aliens gathered to observe the first contact ceremony. Representatives from various council species mingled about, their conversations a mixture of excitement and academic interest. First contacts were rare enough to draw attention from xenobiologists, cultural specialists, and diplomatic observers. The airlock hissed open with a sharp mechanical sound that made several of the more sensitive aliens flinch. What emerged was not the expected group of rogue philosophers or artistic delegates that typically represented new species. Instead, 3 humans in identical dark blue uniforms stepped onto the station deck with synchronized precision. The lead human was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair cut short and scars visible on his weathered face. His uniform bore various insignia and ribbons that seemed to indicate military rank and service. He moved with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to command, his eyes immediately scanning the assembled aliens with what appeared to be a tactical assessment. I am Captain Jake Morrison, representing the Terran Diplomatic Corps, he announced in a clear, authoritative voice. This is Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, our cultural liaison, and Sergeant Pete Johnson, our security attaché. The female human. Rodriguez was shorter but carried herself with the same military bearing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation style, and her uniform was decorated with different insignia than Morrison's. She stepped forward slightly and offered what appeared to be a formal salute to the assembled aliens. We are honored to meet representatives of the Galactic Council, Rodriguez said. Earth sends its greetings and hopes for peaceful relations with all member species. The third human, Johnson, remained silent but alert. His eyes never stopped moving, cataloging exits, potential threats, and defensive positions. His uniform bore fewer decorations but more practical equipment, items that looked suspiciously like weapons to the observing aliens. Junior Diplomat Crickstall approached the human delegation with the slow, graceful movements typical of formal diplomatic encounters. Welcome to Harmony Point Station, representatives of Earth. I am Crickstall, assigned to facilitate your integration into our galactic community. Morrison stepped forward to meet the diplomat, and the aliens noticed his movement was economical and purposeful. When he extended his hand in what appeared to be a human greeting gesture, Crickstall hesitated before carefully touching the offered appendage with a crystalline tendril. "We appreciate your hospitality," Morrison said. "Our government has authorized us to negotiate Earth's entry into the Galactic Council and establish formal diplomatic relations." Something in Morrison's tone made the watching aliens exchange glances. The human spoke of negotiation in terms that sounded more like military briefings than diplomatic discourse. His words carried an underlying authority that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed rather than engaged in lengthy philosophical discussions. "Your vessel," Crickstall ventured carefully, "appears to be of military design. Is this typical for your species' diplomatic missions?" Morrison's expression remained neutral, but the aliens caught a brief exchange of glances between the three humans. "The Defiance is a standard Terran diplomatic vessel," Morrison replied. "All our diplomatic missions are conducted by qualified personnel capable of representing Earth's interests." Rodriguez stepped forward to elaborate. "On Earth, our diplomatic corps is trained to handle any situation that might arise during interstellar missions. We believe in being prepared for all possibilities." The aliens found this explanation puzzling. In their experience, diplomats were scholars and artists, chosen for their wisdom and cultural sensitivity. The idea of military-trained diplomats was as foreign to them as the concept of armed meditation chambers. As the formal greetings concluded, the human delegation was escorted to their assigned quarters. The aliens watched them leave with growing unease, noting how the humans moved in formation, how they automatically positioned themselves to cover each other's blind spots, and how their eyes constantly assessed their surroundings for potential threats. "Something is different about these humans," Crickstall communicated privately to Station Commander Velanoth. "They speak of peace, but they move like warriors." Velanoth's response carried undertones of concern. "Perhaps they are simply cautious. Many species are nervous during first contact. We should proceed with the standard protocols and observe their behavior during the cultural exchanges." But as the first day of contact concluded, both aliens and humans began to realize that this meeting would be unlike any previous first contact in galactic history. The humans had come seeking peace, but they had brought something the galaxy had never seen before: diplomats who were also soldiers, ambassadors who were also warriors, and a species that viewed strength and the willingness to use it as essential components of civilization itself. The second day at Harmony Point Station brought a series of encounters that left both humans and aliens increasingly puzzled about each other's nature. Word of the unusual human delegation had spread throughout the station, drawing curious representatives from dozens of species who wanted to observe these new arrivals firsthand. Dr. Lisa Wang, the mission's cultural attaché, had arrived on a follow-up transport and now stood in the station's central plaza attempting to explain human customs to a group of fascinated aliens. Her academic background in xenocultural studies had prepared her for many scenarios, but not for explaining why Earth's diplomatic corps consisted entirely of military personnel. "You see," Wang said carefully to the assembled crowd of crystalline, gaseous, and multi-limbed beings, humans believe that true diplomacy requires strength. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to protect what is valuable and to stand firm when principles are at stake. A tall, thin alien with translucent skin and multiple eyes tilted its head in confusion. But surely wisdom and artistic expression are more valuable than physical prowess in diplomatic matters? Wang paused, choosing her words carefully. On Earth, we have a saying, peace through strength. We believe that the ability to defend oneself and others is what makes peaceful negotiation possible. Our diplomats are trained to fight not because we seek conflict, but because we understand that sometimes conflict seeks us. The aliens exchanged what appeared to be concerned glances. Their translator systems picked up undertones in Wang's voice that suggested she was simplifying complex concepts for their benefit, but the fundamental message remained disturbing to species that had evolved beyond physical conflict millennia ago. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison and Lieutenant Rodriguez were meeting with Station Commander Velanoth in the administrative section. The commander, a being resembling a floating collection of geometric shapes, was attempting to understand the human approach to diplomatic protocol. Your species' credentials are impressive, Velanoth said, displaying holographic records on the meeting room's central projector. But I must admit confusion about your organizational structure. Your diplomatic corps appears to be a subdivision of your military forces. Morrison nodded. That's correct, Commander. Our diplomats are commissioned officers trained in both negotiation and combat. We find this combination essential for effective representation of Earth's interests. Rodriguez added, every member of our diplomatic missions undergoes extensive training in cultural sensitivity, negotiation techniques, and conflict resolution. We also maintain combat readiness because the universe can be unpredictable. Velanoth's geometric form shifted in what humans were learning to recognize as alien distress. Combat readiness? But surely the goal of diplomacy is to avoid combat. Entirely? The goal is peace, Morrison replied. But peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice, stability, and the strength to maintain both. Our readiness to fight is what makes fighting unnecessary. The conversation was interrupted by an alert tone that echoed throughout the station. Velanoth's form flashed with alarm as data streams appeared around the meeting room's displays. Proximity alert, the commander announced. Unknown vessels approaching the station. Morrison and Rodriguez were on their feet immediately, their trained instincts taking over. How many vessels? Morrison asked, his voice shifting to the crisp tone of military command. 3 ships, Velanoth replied, confused by the human's sudden transformation. They appear to be— Oh no, the identification codes match known Korthic raider vessels. Rodriguez was already activating her communicator. Johnson Wang, report to the command center immediately. We have incoming hostiles. The aliens in the room stared at the humans in bewilderment. In galactic civilization, pirate raids were handled through negotiation and the payment of tribute. Physical resistance was considered barbaric and typically resulted in unnecessary casualties. Commander, Morrison said, what are your defensive capabilities? Velanoth's form flickered with what appeared to be embarrassment. Harmony Point is a diplomatic station. We have minimal security forces, primarily ceremonial guards. The standard protocol for raider encounters is to comply with their demands and file compensation claims with the Council afterward. Morrison and Rodriguez exchanged a look that the aliens were beginning to recognize as human communication. That's not going to work, Rodriguez said grimly, within minutes. The human delegation had assembled in the station's command center. Sergeant Johnson arrived with equipment that the aliens now realized was definitely military gear. Dr. Wang brought data tablets containing information about the station's layout and defensive systems. Status report, Morrison ordered, as the first raider vessels appeared on the tactical display. 3 Korthic destroyers, standard pirate configuration, Johnson reported. They're broadcasting surrender demands and threatening to board if we don't comply. Wang looked up from her analysis of the station's systems. This facility has basic defensive shields and 2 plasma cannons, but they're not designed for actual combat. The aliens here have never had to fight for their lives. Around them, the station's alien crew was beginning to panic. Their crystalline forms were flashing rapidly, their gaseous bodies were swirling in agitation, and their multi-limbed representatives were gesturing frantically as They tried to establish communication with the approaching raiders. "Incoming transmission," announced the station's communication officer, a being that resembled a large flowering plant. "The Korthik are demanding tribute and threatening to take hostages if we resist." Morrison stepped forward to the main communication console. "Patch me through to the raider vessels." "Captain Morrison," Velenoth protested, "please allow our diplomatic staff to handle this situation. Violence will only escalate the conflict." "Commander," Morrison replied, "with respect, your diplomatic approach is about to get everyone on this station killed or enslaved. These raiders aren't interested in negotiation. They're predators and they see you as prey." The communication channel opened and a harsh voice filled the command center. "Attention station personnel. This is Captain Grakdal of the Korthik Raiders. You have 10-time units to transfer all valuable materials to our cargo holds and prepare selected personnel for transport. Resistance will result in the destruction of your station." Morrison keyed the communication system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. Your demands are rejected. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The silence that followed was broken by what sounded like alien laughter. "Humans?" Grakdal's voice carried amusement. "We have heard of your pathetic species. You will make excellent slaves. Prepare for boarding." The communication cut off and alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the station. Morrison turned to his team with expressions that made the watching aliens step back instinctively. "All right, people," Morrison said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "We've got raiders incoming and a station full of civilians who don't know how to fight. Johnson, I want you to assess our defensive options. Rodriguez, start organizing evacuation procedures for non-combatants. Wang, find me everything you can about these Korthik tactics and capabilities." As the humans sprang into action with military precision, the aliens watched in amazement and growing hope. These strange beings who called themselves diplomats were transforming before their eyes into something the galaxy had never seen: protectors, who were willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. The first raider ship opened fire on the station's outer shields, and the battle for Harmony Point began. The first explosion shook Harmony Point Station as the Korthik Raiders' plasma cannons struck the outer defensive shields. Emergency lighting bathed the command center in red as alarms continued to wail throughout the facility. The alien crew members huddled together in terror, their various forms trembling as they faced the reality of violent combat for the first time in their peaceful lives. Captain Morrison stood at the tactical display, his scarred face illuminated by the incoming threat indicators. The transformation in his demeanor was complete. The polite diplomat had vanished, replaced by a seasoned military commander who had faced death many times before. His hands moved across the control panels with practiced efficiency as he assessed the station's limited defensive capabilities. "Shields are holding at 60%, reported Johnson from the weapons console. "But these plasma cannons are basically ceremonial. They might scratch their hull plating if we're lucky." "Lieutenant." Rodriguez was coordinating with the terrified alien staff, her voice calm and authoritative despite the chaos around them. "I need all non-essential personnel to move to the intersections of the station. Use the emergency bulkheads to create protective barriers." The alien stared at her in confusion. Commander Velenoth's geometric form flickered rapidly as he tried to process the concept of civilians preparing for battle. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, surely you don't expect our staff to participate in combat? We are scholars and artists, not warriors." "No," Rodriguez replied, checking her sidearm with practiced ease. "But you can still help by staying alive and out of our way. Move to the center of the station and seal the emergency doors behind you." Dr. Wang had connected her portable computer to the station's information systems and was rapidly analyzing the approaching raider vessels. "Captain, I've got tactical data on Korthik ships. They're designed for boarding actions against undefended civilian targets. Their hulls are tough, but their internal systems are vulnerable to coordinated attacks." Morrison nodded grimly. "How many raiders per ship?" "Approximately 50 per vessel," Wang replied. They rely on overwhelming numbers and the fact that their targets usually surrender without fighting. The second wave of plasma fire struck the station's shields, and the lights flickered ominously. Johnson's voice carried a note of urgency. As he reported the damage, shields down to 40%. They're targeting the docking bays, trying to create entry points. Through the command center's viewing ports, the aliens could see the angular shapes of the raider vessels maneuvering closer to the station. The Korthek ships were designed for intimidation, covered in spikes and weapon ports that made them appear like mechanical predators closing in on helpless prey. "They're launching boarding pods," announced the plant-like communication officer, its voice quivering with fear. "Multiple contacts incoming." Morrison turned to his small team with the expression of a man who had faced impossible odds before. "All right, people. We've got maybe 200 raiders about to board this station, and we're the only thing standing between them and 1,000 helpless civilians." Sergeant Johnson checked his weapon and smiled grimly. "Just like the old days, Captain. Except this time we're protecting aliens instead of human colonists." The first boarding pod struck the station's outer hull with a thunderous crash, followed immediately by the distinctive sound of plasma cutters burning through metal. The aliens in the command center pressed themselves against the walls as the humans prepared for combat. Rodriguez had commandeered the station's internal communication system and was broadcasting instructions to the scattered alien personnel. "This is Lieutenant Rodriguez. All civilians are to remain in secure areas until further notice. Do not attempt to negotiate with the raiders. They are here to harm you, not to talk." The second and third boarding pods attached to different sections of the station, and the sound of metal being cut apart echoed through the corridors. Morrison studied the tactical display, tracking the raiders' entry points and calculating their most likely routes through the station. "They're coming in through Cargo Bay 7, Docking Port 3, and the Auxiliary Maintenance Section," he reported. "Classic multi-point assault designed to divide our attention." Wang looked up from her computer with alarm. "Captain, the alien security personnel are trying to establish communication with the raiders. They're following standard galactic protocol for surrender negotiations." Morrison's expression hardened. "Rodriguez, get down to security and stop them. If they try to surrender, the raiders will just take hostages and use them as leverage." The lieutenant was already moving toward the exit when the first sounds of weapons fire echoed through the station. The distinctive whine of energy weapons was followed by alien screams, not of pain, but of pure terror as the peaceful species encountered violence for the first time. Johnson had taken position at the command center's main entrance, his weapon trained on the corridor beyond. "Contact," he reported calmly. "Multiple hostiles approaching from Section C." The first Korthak raider to round the corner was a hulking creature, covered in chitinous armor and carrying an oversized plasma rifle. It moved with the confidence of a predator that had never faced serious resistance, expecting to find cowering civilians ready for capture. Instead, it found Sergeant Johnson. The human's weapon fired 3 times in rapid succession, each shot precisely placed to exploit weaknesses in the raider's armor. The creature dropped to the deck with a crash that shook the nearby bulkheads, its weapon skittering across the metal flooring. The aliens in the command center stared in shock as Johnson calmly repositioned himself for the next target. They had never witnessed combat before, and the sudden, efficient violence was both terrifying and fascinating. "Tango down," Johnson reported in the matter-of-fact tone of a professional soldier. "More coming up the corridor." Morrison was coordinating the defense from the tactical display, his voice carrying over the communication system to Rodriguez's position. "Amy, what's your status?" "I've got the alien security team secured," Rodriguez replied, her voice punctuated by the sound of weapon fire. "But we've got raiders in the main corridor. They're not expecting resistance." The advantage of surprise was working in the humans' favor. The Korthak raiders had built their reputation on attacking defenseless targets, and they were unprepared for coordinated military resistance. Their tactics relied on intimidation and overwhelming numbers, not on fighting trained soldiers. Dr. Wang was monitoring the raiders' communications, her translation software picking up their increasingly frustrated transmissions. They're reporting unexpected resistance. Their field commanders are demanding explanations about why the weak mammals are fighting back. Another group of raiders appeared in the corridor outside the command center, and Johnson engaged them with the same methodical precision he had shown against the first attacker. The aliens watched in amazement as the human soldier seemed to anticipate his enemy's movements, positioning himself to maximize his advantages while minimizing his exposure to return fire. "The raiders are regrouping," Wang reported. "They're bringing up heavier weapons and more personnel." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we'll show them what human diplomats do when someone threatens innocent lives under our protection." The battle for Harmony Point Station had been raging for 2 hours when the surviving aliens finally understood what they were witnessing. The humans had not just repelled the Korthic raiders. They had systematically hunted them through the station's corridors like predators stalking prey. The elegant diplomatic facility had become a battlefield where Earth's representatives demonstrated capabilities that terrified and amazed the galactic observers. Commander Velenoth cowered in the secured command center, his geometric form flickering with colors that indicated extreme distress. Through the internal sensors, he watched Captain Morrison move through the station with the fluid grace of a born hunter. The human leader no longer resembled the polite diplomat who had arrived days earlier. His movements were economical and deadly, each step calculated to bring him closer to his targets while maintaining tactical advantage. "The raiders are retreating to Section 12, Dr. Wang reported from her position at the sensor console. Her academic demeanor had vanished completely, replaced by the focused intensity of a military intelligence officer. "They're trying to regroup near the auxiliary power core." Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system as he coordinated the human response. "Rodriguez, take the maintenance tunnels and cut off their escape route. Johnson, continue your sweep of the residential areas. I'm moving to engage their main force." The aliens listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans communicated in short, precise bursts that conveyed complex tactical information with perfect clarity. They moved through the station like they had been born for warfare, adapting to the alien environment with frightening efficiency. Lieutenant Rodriguez had taken command of a small group of the station's maintenance robots, reprogramming them to serve as mobile surveillance units. The aliens watched in fascination as she transformed peaceful service machines into tools of war, using their sensors to track raider movements and their mechanical limbs to create barriers and traps. "Contact in Section 9, Rodriguez reported calmly. 8 hostiles moving toward the civilian shelters, engaging now." The sound of weapons fire echoed through the station, but this time it was different. The raiders' panicked shooting was wild and desperate, while the humans' return fire was controlled and precise. Each shot from the human weapons found its target, while the raiders' plasma bolts struck empty corridors and bulkheads. Sergeant Johnson had become something that existed in the nightmares of every raider crew in the galaxy. He moved through the station's darkened corridors like a ghost, appearing behind groups of raiders and eliminating them before they could react. His voice over the communication system was calm and professional as he reported each engagement. 7 Tango's down in Section 15, Johnson announced, moving to clear the engineering deck. The aliens began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans fought with a combination of intelligence, coordination, and ruthless efficiency that no species had ever demonstrated. They adapted to new situations instantly, turned civilian equipment into weapons, and showed no fear when facing superior numbers. Dr. Wang had been monitoring the raiders' communications throughout the battle, and her translations revealed the growing terror in their ranks. "They're calling for reinforcements," she reported. "The raider commanders are reporting that they're facing demon soldiers who cannot be stopped." One of the intercepted transmissions played through the command center speakers, the universal translator struggling to convey the panic in the raider's voice. "These creatures hunt us like animals. They know where we are before we know where they are. They use our own weapons against us and turn our strengths into weaknesses. Morrison's response came through the communication system with the cold certainty of a professional soldier. Let them be afraid. Fear makes them sloppy, and sloppy raiders are dead raiders. The turning point came when the human delegation implemented what they called a pincer movement. Morrison approached the raiders' main position from the front, drawing their attention and fire. Meanwhile, Rodriguez and Johnson moved through the station's service corridors to attack from behind. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans executed this complex maneuver without detailed planning or lengthy coordination. "They fight like a pack," whispered Crystal, the junior diplomat who had first welcomed the humans to the station. "Each one knows what the others will do without being told." The final group of raiders had barricaded themselves in the station's cargo bay, using stolen equipment to create defensive positions. They had taken several alien hostages and were threatening to kill them if the humans continued their attack. In galactic civilization, this would have ended the conflict. No civilized species would risk innocent lives to continue fighting. The humans had a different approach. Morrison appeared at the cargo bay's main entrance, his weapon lowered and his hands visible. "I'm here to negotiate," he announced loudly. "Let's talk about terms." The raider commander, a scarred creature named Vraktal, emerged from behind his barricade with obvious relief. Finally, these strange humans were acting like proper civilized beings. "You will surrender your weapons and submit to capture," he demanded. "In exchange, we will not harm the civilian prisoners," Morrison nodded calmly. "That sounds reasonable. But first, I want you to meet my cultural attaché." The cargo bay's lights suddenly went out, plunging the area into darkness. The raiders' confused shouts were cut short by the sound of precisely aimed weapons fire. When the lights returned moments later, the hostages were unharmed, and the raiders were unconscious on the deck. Rodriguez stepped out of the shadows where she had been waiting, her weapon trained on the fallen raiders. Cultural exchange complete. She reported with what the aliens were learning to recognize as human humor. Johnson's voice came through the communication system with finality. "Station secure, all hostile forces eliminated or neutralized." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems. The aliens in the command center stared at the humans in complete bewilderment. In less than 4 hours, 3 humans had defeated an entire raider fleet that would have enslaved or killed everyone on the station. "Commander." Velenov's form flickered with colors that had no translation in any known language. "How?" he asked. "Simply, how did you do this?" Morrison looked around the command center, his expression returning to the diplomatic calm the aliens had first encountered. "We did what any civilized species should do when innocent lives are threatened. We protected them." Dr. Wang began shutting down her tactical displays and returning to her academic equipment. "On Earth we have a saying, the price of peace is eternal vigilance. Someone must always stand watch against those who would harm the innocent." The aliens realized they had witnessed something that would change galactic civilization forever. These humans had shown that strength and wisdom could coexist, that the capacity for violence could serve the cause of peace, and that true diplomacy sometimes required the willingness to fight for what was right. As the human delegation prepared to resume their diplomatic mission, the aliens finally understood what Earth had truly sent them, not just diplomats but guardians who would stand between civilization and the darkness that threatened it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the incident at Harmony Point Station. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to discuss the implications of what had occurred, and the massive chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species that had never contemplated violence tried to understand what they had witnessed. Council leader Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on the detailed reports streaming across his ceremonial podium. The accounts from Harmony Point painted a picture that challenged everything the galactic community believed about civilization, diplomacy, and the nature of peaceful coexistence. The human delegation single-handedly defeated an entire Korthak raider fleet, Zethkar announced to the assembled representatives. 3 individuals accomplished what our combined security forces have never attempted. They fought back against raiders and won. A ripple of concerned communications passed through the chamber as various species processed this information. The crystalline Velthari flickered with nervous energy while the gaseous Netherians swirled in agitated patterns. The concept of diplomatic personnel engaging in combat was so foreign to their understanding that many delegates struggled to accept the reports as factual. Commander Velanoth, still bearing the emotional scars of the battle, addressed the council through a holographic projection from Harmony Point. Honored delegates, I witnessed these events personally. The humans transformed from polite diplomats into efficient warriors in moments. They showed capabilities that I believed existed only in ancient military histories. The testimony continued. As various alien survivors described their experiences during the battle, Dr. Wang had requested permission to address the council, and she now stood before the assembled representatives with the same calm professionalism she had shown during the crisis. Honorable council members, Wang began, I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human nature and our approach to diplomacy. We come in peace, but we come prepared for those who do not share our peaceful intentions. 1. Of the Netherian representatives, a swirling mass of luminescent gases posed the question that troubled many delegates. Dr. Wang, your species appears to view violence as an acceptable solution to conflict. How can we trust beings who resort to warfare so readily? Wang's response carried the weight of centuries of human experience. We do not resort to violence. Readily, we resort to violence reluctantly, but we resort to it effectively when peaceful options are exhausted. The raiders at Harmony Point were not interested in negotiation or compromise. They came to harm innocent beings. Captain Morrison, standing beside Wang in his formal dress uniform, added his perspective. Every human in our diplomatic corps has taken an oath to protect the innocent and defend the principles of civilization. Sometimes that protection requires force, but it is always force applied with precision and purpose. The debate that followed revealed the deep philosophical divide between humanity and the existing galactic community. Species after species spoke of their evolution beyond conflict, their transcendence of violent instincts, and their commitment to peaceful resolution of all disputes. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, finally requested permission to speak. With respect, honored delegates, your peaceful evolution has been possible because you have never encountered a species that chose to remain predators. You have built your civilization on the assumption that all intelligent beings eventually embrace peace. The silence that followed was profound. The aliens had never considered that their peaceful existence might be dependent on the absence of true predators rather than the universal embrace of civilized values. Crickstall, the junior diplomat who had first welcomed the humans, flickered with new understanding. You are saying that your capacity for violence is what allows you to choose peace meaningfully, Morrison nodded gravely. A choice made from weakness is no choice at all. Our ability to fight is what gives weight to our decision not to fight. When we choose peace, we do so from a position of strength, not helplessness. The Council's debate continued for hours as various species grappled with concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of civilization. Some delegates argued that the humans were too dangerous to admit to the galactic community, while others recognized that the human approach might be necessary in a universe that contained threats like the Korthic Raiders. The turning point came when Ambassador Siethrol of the Kevian Federation rose to address the chamber. The Kevians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and their perspective carried significant weight in council deliberations. Fellow delegates, Tithril began, we have spent centuries building our peaceful civilization by avoiding conflict rather than by conquering it. Perhaps it is time to consider that true peace requires guardians, beings willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. The vote that followed was closer than any in recent council history. By a narrow margin, the delegates approved humanity's admission to the galactic community with a unique designation. Earth would become the first member species authorized to maintain military forces for the protection of civilian populations. The ceremony that followed was unlike any previous admission to the Council. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Rodriguez, Sergeant Johnson, and Dr. Wang stood before the assembled delegates as representatives of a species that had chosen to be both warriors and protectors. The Terran Diplomatic Corps is hereby recognized as Earth's official representative to the Galactic Council, Zethkar announced. Your species will serve as defenders of the innocent and guardians of the peace that we all cherish. In the weeks that followed, requests poured in from across the galaxy. Species that had suffered under raider attacks and pirate raids requested human protection. The concept of military diplomacy spread throughout the galactic community as other species began to understand that true civilization required both the wisdom to choose peace and the strength to defend it. The human delegation established the Terran Protective Services, a joint military diplomatic organization that would represent Earth's interests while providing security for vulnerable populations. Captain Morrison became the first director of Galactic Defense, while Lieutenant Rodriguez headed the new Department of Protective Diplomacy. Dr. Wang returned to Earth to establish training programs for future diplomatic personnel, ensuring that humanity's representatives would continue to embody the principle that strength and wisdom must work together to create lasting peace. The galaxy had learned that Earth had not sent diplomats who happened to be soldiers, or soldiers who happened to be diplomats. Earth had sent human beings, creatures who understood that the capacity for violence and the commitment to peace were not contradictory forces, but complementary aspects of true civilization. As the human ships departed from various council worlds to begin their protective missions, the aliens finally understood what they had gained. They had not just admitted a new species to their community. They had welcomed guardians who would stand watch against the darkness, ensuring that the light of civilization could continue to shine across the stars. The humans had proven that sometimes the greatest act of diplomacy is the willingness to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and that true peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of those brave enough to stand against it.